Hi, welcome back to the channel. My name is Lynn Jeong. I am a science fiction and fantasy writer, and I make videos about writing, books, travel, and whatever else I feel like on this channel. My voice is going. It's it's left the room. It doesn't want to be here today. Today is a little bit of a special video, not in a crazy way or anything, but Kelley Tai recently asked me if I wanted to hop on to her 24-hour readathon, and I said yes because I have nothing else to do. I'm between work trips right now, so what else am I gonna do? It's currently Sunday, February 19th, and basically the goal is for us to read as many books as we can, or as much as we can, in the next 24 hours. So I'll be keeping tabs of what I read, like the amount of pages I read and the amount of books I read through Storygraph. I have a number of books selected, which I should grab to show you guys. For the most part, I think I'm gonna try to burn through a couple of arcs. There's two that I've been in the middle of reading, one that I'm very close to finishing, and that is And Break the Pretty Kings by Lena Jeong. And then I also have Deep as the Sky, Red as the Sea by Rita Chang Epig. It's a historical fiction novel about a Chinese female pirate. Yeah, so I'm about 89% of the way through on And Break the Pretty Kings, which is a young adult fantasy set in a world inspired by the Three Kingdoms era of Korea, which I have some thoughts on. Beyond those two arcs, which I should be able to finish today, I'm also very close to the end of The Traitor Cormorant by Seth Dickinson, so I'm 83% of the way through that one. But I also want to read some physical books because honestly, it's been a really long time since I've held a physical book in my hands. And I've grabbed myself a nice selection today because I'm actually at home where my physical library lives. I'm definitely not going to get through all of these because that would be insane. There's five. I lost the ability to count. There's 5 books here, 2 are novellas, so I'll start with those. The first is The Monster of ELENDHAVEN by Jennifer Giesbrecht. I'm guessing. This is a pretty short novella. I feel like I can munch this or chomp on this in between longer books, which would be nice. Just a little bit of a breather, get that sense of accomplishment, get my flow going. I haven't read this much in a really long time. And then This Is How You Lose the Time War by Max Gladstone and Amal El-Mohtar. This is, I believe, a science fiction novella, and it's queer, so that's great. I think they're both queer. I read gay books, I don't know. And then we have If We Were Villains by Emil Rio. I've been trying to read this for so long, and I've been really struggling to get my foothold on it, if that makes sense. Like, for some reason I'll start it and I'll be enjoying what I'm reading, but I just always get interrupted or swept aside by a different book. And this is a dark academia novel about Shakespeare nerds at Shakespeare school. This was recommended to me by my agent like a really long time ago because I am writing a dark academia book and have been for a couple years now, so this I need to get through. This is definitely top of the physical book priority list today. And then I have ELATSOE by Darcie Little Badger. This is, I believe, a young adult or middle grade novel. I'm actually not too sure, so I'll look into that. I have no idea what it's about, but it won an award, and I've just been really interested in this, and the author is an enrolled member of the Apache tribe. I've been trying to read more indigenous speculative fiction, so this is definitely on the list, and just the cover, this like illustrative sort of sketchy style is just really one of my weaknesses. I don't like the super crisp sort of like corporate graphic style that a lot of books have been going for these days. I like that very like hand-drawn look to books. I mean, that's what I would personally go for if I had any choice in my book covers, or if I had books to have covers for. And then the last pick is The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. I feel like I'll just kind of, I've been doing this with this book where the prose is really nice, so I'll just sort of dip into it when I need that like prose lift. But I could not tell you what's going on in the story. I'm also only a couple pages in, so yeah, that'll be sort of like a filler, like a snack. I'm trying to think of these all as meals that I'm trying to meal prep for, and this is definitely like the appetizer snack. A little bit of chocolate in between meals to keep me going. I can't tell what's better. I just have accepted that because I refuse to go to a salon, my hair is just gonna look like this, and that's okay. I guess there's nothing to do now but eat a little bit, have some tea, and start reading. So I'll probably be spending most of the day inside, unfortunately, because it is very beautiful out. I struggle to read outside because the light is like too much for me, if that makes sense. The light bouncing off of white paper or staring at my screen outside where the brightness gets like boosted because of the sunlight. You know, the light is just too much for me. So I don't know what I'll do. I also have a video coming out today, so I'm gonna have to tune in for the premiere of that, but I don't really have to pay attention because I made the video. I just like to be in the chat area in case anyone has questions or wants to talk. And once again, this is in collaboration or in tandem with Kelley Tai. She just had this idea, or she sort of set this up or was like, I'm gonna do this, and I just kind of jumped on the bandwagon. So be sure to check out her video. I will link it below, as well as her channel. She is one of my favorite author tubers and my first author tube friend on here, so y'all should check her out if you haven't already. I'm gonna start off by reading And Break the Pretty Kings for a little bit. I guess how I'll do this is how I've seen Kelley do it. I've never done one of these before. I will sort of do like the little interlude B-roll stuff, and then I'll also just share my thoughts as I sort of finish or make decent progress on each book I'm reading. And that's all the intro. I will catch you guys in a little bit. Hi. It's 10:45, the first hour of this is wrapping up, and I just finished reading my first book of the day. It was And Break the Pretty Kings by Lena Jeong, and I didn't like it that much. I feel weird about it because I was so excited for this book. It's a young adult fantasy based off of the Three Kingdoms period of Korea. I love fantasy that takes from Korean culture or is inspired by it, and the author is also Korean American, I believe. You never know who's Canadian these days. But unfortunately, even though there were so many elements that I like really liked, it just felt odd. The book just doesn't really take a lot of time to explain the magic, but because it's so reliant on magic, like the plot is very magic centric, you kind of need that to get a grip of what's going on. There was that. There was also this element where, so the main character in this book has the ability to switch with her future self at any point in time. She doesn't have a great grasp of it, but she does this a couple times throughout the book. And instead of clarifying anything that happens, it's meant to make it more confusing, to sort of mislead you, but I didn't even know where I was being misled, if that makes sense. There was a through line where she basically doesn't know who her love interest is. She just knows that it's gonna be sort of like a terrible time. And there's like 3 to 4 different candidates for that position. So every time she switches to the future and she's with her love interest, either their face is unrecognizable because they're so old or they're wearing a mask. It all just felt like weirdly convenient. And there's a lot of contrivances like this. Like, it was very much the book was sort of twisting itself to be confusing or to mislead the reader in some way. Honestly, the lack of clarity just made for a really messy writing or reading experience. And there wasn't so much as like a mystery and intrigue feeling as like a frustration feeling, which kind of sucks. This book took me like 2 months to get through. Like, it's been a really big struggle for me, and I was so excited when the arc dropped into my inbox. So kind of a bummer start to the day, but I'm going to go ahead and pick up one of my physical books because my eyes kind of hurt from looking at the screen, and I might eat a little something. So I'm actually going to go ahead and start reading When We Were Villains, or If We Were Villains. All of these books that have villains in the title, I just can't do it. If We Were Villains by Amal is going to be what I'm diving into next, so hopefully I can finish this in the next couple hours. It sucks that that first read was such not a good time, but I kind of knew that going in because I was already most of the way through. I just needed that last push to finish it. I'll update you guys once I've gotten a decent amount of the way through this one. Alright, it's currently 4:30 or just about. I am a little bit around somewhere in the area of 60% of the way through If We Were Villains by Amal. This has been a really fun time for me. I've been tearing through this book, enjoying it, just drinking in the prose and the novel use of structure that harkens back to Shakespeare. It's like really well crafted and so well paced and intriguing and fascinating, and like, oh, I just feel like I'm learning so much just reading this. But I wanted to dip in with a little bit of commentary before I finished, because this book it should come with a label that's like, be wary if you were ever a theater kid or theater adjacent in your life, which I've been theater adjacent at many different points in my life. It's brilliant, but it's also so freaking like, man, if these characters were in any other context, they would be the cringiest people I've ever met in my life. I would legitimately like bully them, I think. Not that I'm a bully, but just that they kind of need it. And there's so many little details that are so specific. Like, I highly suspect this author also has some sort of like theater tainted past because there's so many little details that are so on the nose. There was a line that was like, they're talking twice as loud as they need to be because they're still performing. I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what theater kids fucking do. So I've just been getting a little bit of a kick out of that. I won't lie, it was a little bit painful at first, but got used to it, and now that there's slightly less of that nonsense, it's been a lot smoother of a ride. I think I'll be able to finish this one up tonight for sure because it has been a very smooth read. I rarely find myself losing focus, which has been such a nice experience, honestly. I was talking a little bit about this with Kelley just a few minutes ago because we had a quick catch-up call to sort of mark the halfway point of the day. And it has been such a long time since I've given myself this much time to read. As much as I tried to set aside a little bit of time here and there throughout the day, as much as I try to read whenever I'm not doing something else actively, it's like so different to read a book in pieces versus read it pretty much all in one go. Being able to fully devote my attention to this book and really absorb it and take my time with it while also reading it very efficiently has been so beneficial in terms of how much I'm retaining. The book that I was reading before this, the arc that I didn't really like, I will say that I was reading it in really chopped up pieces at just random intervals. Basically, there'd be times where I wouldn't read it for a week or more, and that definitely just kind of messed with my ability to retain any of the world building information. So I feel like, not that I wasn't being unfair on it, because I do still stand by what I said earlier. It is a confusing book, and I think that there were a lot of craft issues that could have been handled at the editing stage. That being said, I think there's a little bit more leeway given that I just couldn't focus on it the same way. After this, I'm going to tackle another arc that I'm partway through. This one I have a little bit less read ahead of time. It is Deep as the Sky, Red as the Sea by Reader Chang Epig, and I'm 24% of the way through. This is what I'd read previously. This is the historical fiction novel about the Chinese female pirate, which I've also been enjoying, but it's a little bit dry. It does very much read like historical fiction at what I think is kind of its worst. It definitely is not as bad as some of the other things I've read, but it's very dry, feels kind of like a textbook. It's hard to sort of like engage with the characters as people. They feel more like figures. They're not really brought to life in the same way that a pure fiction novel might. But I've been enjoying it so far, and I'm excited to jump back into it once I'm done with this beautiful book, which might be one of my new favorites. So I'm going to head right back into that, and then I'll catch up with you guys in a little bit. It's 7:40. I just finished reading If We Were Villains by Amal. I've not read a book from beginning to end in one sitting in such a long time, but this one was a really easy one to do that with. This is officially my first 5-star read of the year, so yay. And I want to talk a little bit about this, but I feel like I'm still sort of digesting, like I just finished. This is about 7 students at a conservatory school that specializes in Shakespeare. They're all studying the theater arts, so they're performing Shakespeare, they're actors. Something tragic happens and they get caught up in this conspiracy and their guilt, and it's like messy but really just well plotted out and thought out, very character driven, and all the characters are so clear, but they're also larger than life. There's this consistent theme where all of them kind of get sucked into the roles they're usually typecast as and very easily lose themselves, which I think is very pertinent given that they're all college undergraduate age, so they're like 21 to 22 for the most part. I'm just gonna set it down for now, which I feel like is an age where your identity is so in flux and so susceptible to outside influence. It's definitely like that dark academia sort of obsession with your subject matter and what you're studying sort of taking over and obliterating all rational thought, basically. And the relationships are so complex and interesting. I think they're probably the most interesting thing about this book, not just the romantic relationships or the ones that officially explicitly play out on the page, but just the way that they all fill roles in each other's lives and play off of one another and depend on one another. It's like that very sort of like toxic, codependent friend group dynamic is so present and so interestingly played out. Like, this is just absolutely a masterclass in character studies and character-driven stories in general. And I found it to just like play out like it was an ending I couldn't quite guess. Like, there were enough red herrings. Everyone is sort of suspicious. It's like perfect, so perfect. I feel like really motivated to work on my dark academia now because it's definitely like a different vibe because it's a fantasy book. Or the one I'm working on is a fantasy book. It's got less characters, but it does also sort of feature this like tragedy at the center of it and this idea of all these super complicated people that can't be trusted. I want to like go through this again and find my favorite parts and just figure out like how Amal, the author, is just placing these reveals and placing these little clues and like leading you astray. Like it's such a good mystery as well, even though that's not really the main point of it. Wow, I mean, just a really good book. Anyway, I do feel like reading something quite a bit lighter, so I'm going to go with ELATSOE. I do have an arc lined up. It's that historical one I've been reading, but that one's also sort of on the heavier side, so I probably won't dive into that tonight. If I get bored of this, I'm allowing myself room to switch over to one of these two novellas I have here, which are the Time War one and the Monster of El-Endhaven. It feels nice to be holding physical books again. I've been reading a lot of ebooks because I buy a lot of ebooks on sale, so I have a very long backlist to get through, and I've been trying to work my way through that, but that means I end up staring at my phone like all the time. So yeah, it just feels nice to flip through paper again. So this will probably be my last update. I've already changed and washed up for the most part. All right, I guess good night for now. Ooh, I look particularly crusty right now. So it's officially the end of this 24-hour reading challenge. It's currently 10 a.m. roughly. Oh, a little bit past. But I overshot a little bit because I was really absorbed in the novella I was reading. This Is How We Lose the Time War by Max Gladstone and Amal El-Mohtar. So I will get into that in a little bit and just sort of do a quick flyover of all the books I read. I ended up finishing 4 books in this 24-hour reading challenge. I finished the arc I was reading and Break the Pretty Kings by Lena Jeong. I also ended up finishing The Traitor Bardo Cormorant by Seth Dickinson last night in bed. I didn't have that much left in it, but I'm really glad I was able to finish that. And then I read If We Were Villains by Amal from beginning to end, and I read This Is How We Lose the Time War from beginning to end. This was like, I've said this a couple of times for this vlog, but it's the first time I've been able to sit down and really focus on reading for such a prolonged period of time, and I think it was super beneficial. Like, just being able to set that time aside and to focus on pretty much nothing else has just been great. Like, I've been able to focus so much more deeply than I'd be able to normally when reading, and it really changed my reading experience. Like, I really loved these 2 books that I read from beginning to end in this time period. I'd say that the only book that I didn't really have the best time reading was And Break the Pretty Kings, unfortunately. I'll probably cover that in my wrap up at the end of this quarter, but it just wasn't really for me. I found it kind of messy and convoluted, and yeah, I'm kind of bummed about that, especially because it's something that I was so excited to read. But other than that, everything else was pretty great. 3 of the books I read were very queer, which I love. I mean, it was not on purpose, but it just shows that I have good taste. And I also got to read my first 5-star read of the year, which was this one. So what can we learn from this? I think I need to do this like once every couple of months just to sort of get some reading done. I definitely think that picking out books that I really enjoyed from the start and kept me engaged from the start and were just really well done helped me get through this and finish a lot more books than I might have normally. For example, I started reading ELATSOE, which was sort of on my TBR for this challenge, but then I found myself not really sinking into the voice the way I would have liked. That's just because this is written for a slightly younger audience than I expected, so it was just not what I was feeling at the moment, and so I set it aside and picked up something else, and it worked out really well. I think having that sort of flexibility in regards to my pile of books was very helpful. I am kind of bummed that I didn't get to the Starless Sea and that I didn't get to finish the historical arc I've been reading, but you know what? I'll be reading those at some point, eventually. Anyway, this was a great way to burn through my TBR. I am so glad I read this one, especially since I've been working on my own dark academia adult novel. It's fantasy, lots of differences, but still, I feel like this just sort of helped show me how strong the genre can be, because I feel like dark academia gets sort of thrown around as a gimmick term almost. It's very much associated with like Pinterest in my mind, but it is a real subgenre. It is something that can very effectively and interestingly tackle these issues of like institutions and academic discrimination and all of these issues that, I mean, I've only really done my undergrad and I went to public school, but I find it so interesting, and I find that type of personality and type of life, like the kind of characters you find in these books are very obsessive with their studies and subject matter, super interesting to explore. Anyway, yeah, this book just does that all really well. It has a little bit less of the burn down the institution stuff than I'd like, but it does take place at like conservatory school, which is elitist, but significantly not as establishment as, say, I don't know, your Ivy Leagues. I also really enjoyed This Is How You Lose the Time War. This is a science fiction novella. It's pretty short, like just under 200 pages. It's very queer. It's basically about a love story that unfolds between two rival agents who are messing with time on orders from the various faceless, nameless organizations that they work for. Well, not entirely nameless, but you get the gist. And they fall in love through these letters, and it's very poetic. A lot of the time when I think of science fiction, and this is entirely on me, my bias is toward a stiffer writing style, something that is very utilitarian and more telling maybe than showing. But this was just so beautifully written. It's so poetic. The epistolary, I never know how to pronounce that word. The epistolarian sort of elements just work really well and become so romantic. Like there's so many lines of just pure poetic romance in there. And I think it really goes to show that I've been neglecting my sci-fi side. I am scientific by trade, like my job is science, and I love science, but it's always been hard for me to approach science fiction in a way that I found satisfying and doesn't just feel like science fantasy. Yeah, I guess the moral of that is that I really kind of want to start thinking about writing some more science fiction stuff. I have a couple of ideas that are science fiction leaning, but it'd be cool to develop them and especially sort of like tackle that type of world building. And then for the Traitor Borrow Cormorant, oh my god, I'm so glad I finished it. It's so good. I kind of got a spoiler for the ending, but I was still devastated. Like it hit so hard. I don't know, I never thought of myself as someone who would so enjoy that very politics heavy, sort of hard fantasy world building focused type of book, but it was so good, and I feel like the writer did a really good job of making the characters central to the world. The world building is very intense, yes, but it is also still a very character-driven novel, which I appreciate. That balance is always very good. Made it feel like I was not reading a textbook the whole time, which is my biggest pet peeve when it comes to speculative fiction. I think it was really inspiring in terms of me just sort of taking a harder look at my own world building and thinking about those specific political intricacies. I mean, I personally don't think I have the attention span to write a super hard, politically driven epic fantasy of that nature specifically, but just like imbuing elements of that into my own like very loosey-goosey world building when it comes to my secondary world fantasy books. Okay, so that is pretty much it. Thank you so much again, Kelley, for letting me tag along sort of informally in this 24-hour reading challenge. You guys should definitely check out her video as well. I'll link it below. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you guys next time.